Hello, and welcome back to yet another installment of the Wet Spot Tropical Fish unboxing video series, hopefully in perpetuity. This week we're going to be taking a look at all the cool things, although maybe not every single one of the neat fish that we got in stock this time around, this Monday. We'll be examining just a few of our favorites and taking a few longer shots, show off some of the neat stuff we got, starting off with these. It's a wonderful cichlid as we hone in from Lake Malawi. The VC10 Placidochromis malomo. It's a larger haplochromine fish from the southern part of Lake Malawi, and it is kind of a larger hap. Maybe not the biggest in the lake by far, but does get some good size, up to 10 inches with some good growth, with a lot of time, with a lot of space, although it will take several years for them to get that large. Not too feisty. It is going to be more of a carnivore, and especially in the wild sometimes you'll see them with much larger lips. I've never honestly seen them in captivity with those, but they're kind of bulbous, and that would be for them to pick through crevices in the wild and try to sneak through and get, tasty invertebrates, other little morsels in there. I would say for a Malawi, even though Malawi cichlids are frequently all painted with the same brush as aggressive or somewhat aggressive or very aggressive, these are not too bad. They're sturdy, they'll hold their own. And males do get this beautiful kind of pinkish, blackish, blue, whitish all throughout the body, whereas the females, or when they're small, will show off kind of this giraffe-like pattern. Alrighty, next up, we're going to take a look at yet another Rift Lake cichlid. This is Chilinachromis sp endoboi, sometimes labeled as endobnoi, sometimes described as Chilinachromis burchardi. Fish of many names, but unless you're a taxonomist or very, very particular, nothing wrong with that. None of that really matters as much as some of the basic facts about this guy. It's a very, very neat fish from Lake Tanganyika. It is a cichlid. It's going to be found more close to the eastern shorelines. Males will get a little larger than females, maybe topping out after some time at about 5 inches. Females maybe 4.5. Much like the cichlid we just covered, I don't think it's too feisty, even if Rift Lake cichlids are often all categorized as aggressive, certainly meaner than your average neon tetra, but I don't think they're too bad. Definitely not as aggressive as you see those Tropheus in the background that we're seeing. Beautiful color. These guys are very similar to their close relatives Gyllidochromis in that they would spend a lot of time in more rocky areas, spaces between them where they'd hunt and have their territories. Alright, next up we finally get to a catfish, my favorite. Sorry, cichlids. These are Corydoras mitae, or mitae, I've heard it pronounced many different ways. Wonderful little Corydoras catfish from the Rio Meta in Colombia. Sometimes they're also called false bandit cories or bandit cories. Whole lot of common names going on for these since there's a lot of very similar looking species or undescribed fish. Like a lot of cories, they're going to be pretty sturdy, fairly tolerant, armored little catfish that'll reach a little over 2 inches in length. Spend a lot of the time sifting through sand so they could get a lot of tasty morsels like worms, or other small invertebrates, small bits of plant matter or detritus in their diet. So make sure, of course, to give them a nice, varied diet in there, and especially try to make sure they have soft sand. Cannot stress that enough. We'll continue to stress that every time we hone in on a cory, as you see now, because anything too rough or sharp could shear off those nice little barbels and possibly cause infections. As I mentioned, there are several species that look very similar to these. Other than the location, one easy way to tell that these are mitae is that nice, beautiful black bar ends right at that caudal base. It doesn't extend into the tail at all, and also makes it an awfully attractive fish. I love that black in the dorsal, kind of just barely eking out to that full black stripe. Very nice cory. Alright, next up we have another very beautiful fish, Gymno geophysicists gymnogenes. Whole big mouthful, no common name to be seen. This is it's another cichlid from Uruguay and southern Brazil in nature, although ours are tank raised. Gymnogeophagous on the whole are a really interesting genus that unfortunately, due to their range, aren't always seen in the hobby. Variations of them, or really any type, can be kind of rare, but they're very, very pretty. They're all just kind of glittering jewels, and they do behave very similarly to some of their cousins in the genus Geophysicists that are a lot more frequently seen. They'll get about 6 inches in length. They're going to be just kind of general omnivores, eating whatever they can pick through the substrate for. And you can even see in the bag, before they've even acclimated, they're just very, very pretty. Cannot stress that enough. I think that part of why, other than their range, that we don't see these a lot in the hobby is they are a little different to keep. Given their southern ranges, many Gymno geophagists do prefer to be kept in cooler water, say in some cases mid-60s, no higher than high 70s. Although tank-raised specimens like these can be a bit more tolerant. I just definitely wouldn't keep them warm. You can burn them out, cause issues with the fish. But it does mean that they're very good candidates for, say, tubbing outside if you live somewhere where it's a little bit more moderately warm. Say here in the Pacific Northwest would be a really cool summer idea. All right, next up we have a very cool pleco, yet another catfish. This is Parancistris nudiventris, there we go, too many N's. Also called L31 from the Rio Xingu in Brazil. This is a beautiful, beautiful pleco. I know, yes, there's a lot of plecos out there that are black with white spots. Yes, I know there's many beautiful plecos from the Xingu, but I like these guys. They've got kind of this weird fat little body. They've got those really tiny, just little pinpricks of white that's very attractive. They would actually come from very fast-flowing areas like many other plecos from the Xingu, so preferably with a lot of oxygen as well as keeping them warm. And they're going to be general grazers in captivity. They eat algae, they eat aufwuchs. They're going to be trying to consume little microorganisms that are on biofilm. And like a lot of plecos from that area, they're quite capable of going speedily, but they will spend a lot of time kind of suction onto something. I really like, here in the store, directing power heads to them that just kind of blast them. That really shows off what they would be doing in the wild. Just a really neat pleco you don't see very often. Alright, got another cool fish. Finally something that isn't a catfish or a cichlid. These are Micronamichylis, sometimes put in the genus Unanilus, cruciatus, the Pygmy multi-striped loach. Wonderful little fish, gets about 2 inches on males eventually, females maybe a little smaller, a little rounder. Come from Vietnam. It's a very, very nice little loach in that they don't get huge, so you could have a large school of them. As you can see, they're quite gregarious, preferably kept in large groups. You could have a lot of them in a small tank, and especially, as we can see right about here, if kept by like bold cyprinids like harlequin rasboras or white clouds, they will spend a lot of time kind of flitting about, and they will sometimes also be called a hovering loach for their sometimes interesting habit of kind of floating there in midair, flapping their pectorals, so to speak, to kind of maintain position. They are micro-predators in the wild. They eat very small invertebrates, worms, things like that, but in captivity I've had no issue getting them onto really any type of food. Alright, next up, one of my favorite fish that we're featuring this time around. This is Hemigrammus pulcher, the Garnet, or pretty tetra. These fish have been in the hobby for a very long time. Naturally, they would occur in the Peruvian part of the Amazon. They're extraordinarily sturdy. They're a very handsome fish. There's a polite way of saying they don't just blast you with color, but very nice iridescence, nice dark areas. Get about 2 inches long. They're easy to keep, they're easy to breed, they're tolerant to about any water parameter that you throw at them. They'll eat everything you throw at them. Nature, general kind of tetra diet, so to speak, micro-predator. They eat bits of algae, they eat bits of other plant matter. They're not aggressive, just a really, really nice fish in many ways, and I've always had a gigantic soft spot for fish that maybe aren't the most brightly colored and have been in the hobby for a long time. It's just I guess a personal appreciation I have, but much like one of my favorite tetras, the head and tail light, they do spend a lot of time in the upper range of the mid-water, and especially if you really want to treat yourself, you could put these guys in more of a black water system, kind of phase out a lot of that color except for the nice shiny bits. See that iridescence as they school and move around. Just a great tetra if you're looking for something to start with, or if you're newer to the hobby, or if you just have an appreciation for kind of a ruddy reddish purple with some shininess to it. Alrighty, next up, something yet again different, and it's a fish that I'm actually keeping this time personally. Surprise! These are Boraris maculatus, the pygmy spot rasbora. True to the name, they are very tiny, although one of the largest fish, not the largest in the genus, if I'm remembering rightly. They'll reach maybe almost an inch in length, would be gigantic. It's a very, very small fish, like everything else in the genus. Has a very, very wide distribution in nature, found in Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, just many, many parts of Southeast Asia. And like many tiny fish, as you can see, they look best, they display best when they're kept in a gigantic group. And since they put out very little waste, you could easily cram dozens upon dozens in something the size of a 10-gallon, as long as your filtration and water changes were on the up and up. They're not as popular as their close cousins, the chili rasbora with that nice bright red strike, but as they age, they will get this very pretty deep red color. I know mine at home are showing a lot of that. I would say the hardest part of keeping them is making sure their water doesn't get too terribly hard, and just making sure they have little tiny foodstuffs to eat. But other than that, a nice little micro rasbora. Alright, we'll march onward with arguably the prettiest fish on this list. Sorry, everybody else. Nothobranchius guntheri, Gunther's killifish. These in the wild would be found on, hopefully I say this right, Unguja Island in the Zanzibar archipelago in Africa. It's an annual killifish. We'll get that out of the way right now. In captivity, you'll live maybe a year and some change. I think almost 2 years is the record. Like a lot of Nothobranchius, the females have wonderful personality and are kind of grayish, whereas the males are absolutely brilliantly beautiful. Nice yellows, nice reds, bits of blue. And like other Nothobranchius, they can be a little bit of a challenge to keep in a community setup. They don't always take to dried foods very readily. Some species can be a little nippy, they're very slow competitors, so you do have to be a little careful with what you keep them with. Fortunately, many small African fish or some South American fish that aren't too fast are good fits for them. They're also fairly tolerant of a decent range of parameters, standard tropical, about 7.5 pH, 73 to 80 degrees would be just fine, and these guys can be spawned fairly easy in aquariums. Interestingly enough, they're also used for mosquito controls where they come from. Last but not least, we're going to do not a fish. How interesting is that? We're going to be doing the African dwarf frog, Hymenocyrus botgeri, not really sure how to say that, but a wonderful little amphibian for a lot of community setups. These guys will max out at maybe 2 inches, would be quite stout. In the wild, they'd be found throughout Africa, but they're very, very common in the aquarium hobby. So ours, including, I would assume, nearly all, if not all the ones you see, will come tank raised from various parts of the world. They are nice little communities inhabitants, as I mentioned, but there are 2 caveats. Their tank cannot be too deep, as they don't have gills. They do need atmospheric oxygen, so they need to get to the surface, as well as they do have what seems like fairly poor eyesight. They relish bloodworms, tubifex worms, bits of frozen food, but they're pretty slow at getting around to it, so anything zippy like that might outcompete them. You wouldn't want to keep them with anything too fast or anything that would snarf up all those bloodworms before they get a chance, but they're awfully cute little guys. They are fairly commonly bred in captivity. I know anecdotally they also sing. I never got mine to do that, but nice little trilling noises, sometimes late at night. Just a neat little animal that you can add in that isn't a shrimp or snail if you're looking for a non-fish. Saw something you can't live without? Friendly reminder that everything that we did feature today is available here in the store or online. Feel free to check us out at wetspottropicalfish.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get links to our most updated stock list that have all our fish available for purchase.